because losing desire for someone that you love is one of the most disorienting things that happens in a long-term relationship. And the usual explanations sometimes skip over what might be going on. When you track your partner's emotional temperature during sex, when you adjust your enthusiasm based on what they seem to need rather than what you're actually feeling, when you say yes because saying no or saying something different involves managing their disappointment for the rest of the evening, you're doing work, real, specific, exhausting work inside an experience that's supposed to be shared and pleasurable and connected. And in sex, it can almost be invisible because it's supposed to look like caring. But your body knows the difference between being connected to someone and being responsible for their experience. And when sex repeatedly becomes a place where you monitor and manage and perform and accommodate, your body can start associating intimacy with vigilance rather than pleasure. And vigilance makes it much harder to stay open to desire. So what looks like, oh, I just don't want them anymore, may actually be much more nuanced. And underneath flattened desire, resentment is building quietly and steadily in the form of unexpressed needs and unacknowledged labor and doing more than we really want to do and being responsible for someone else's experience while our own becomes secondary. And resentment and desire, they don't coexist easily. The deeper issue is that desire requires a self. Intimacy doesn't mean disappearing into your partner. In fact, being able to stay connected to what you want and what you don't want, and what feels good and what doesn't, and what you're curious about. This is part of what makes genuine intimacy possible. Because when you spend sex attending to your partner's experience and abandoning your own, eventually your desire has nowhere to go. You can't keep abandoning yourself and expect your desire to feel at home. Reclaiming desire doesn't begin with forcing yourself to want sex you don't want, but it begins with noticing where you abandon yourself, where you leave yourself. And surprisingly, it might actually sound like saying no, or saying not like that, or saying slower, or I want this, or I don't know what I want yet. And none of these are failures of intimacy. In fact, they can actually be acts of connection with yourself and with your partner, because your experience during sex matters just as much as theirs. And when your body begins to have repeated experiences of being allowed to be present rather than responsible, desire has somewhere to return to. And the labor you've been doing is real, and so is the cost of doing it alone. But learning to do intimacy differently, that's where the real change becomes possible. Because losing desire for someone that you love is one of the most disorienting things that happens in a long-term relationship. And the usual explanations sometimes skip over what might be going on. When you track your partner's emotional temperature during sex, when you adjust your enthusiasm